Hello everybody, this is Evan Rogers coming at you with a slightly different video than usual. I'm taking a break, not really, just it's the end of the season, and something interesting happened on Facebook the other day. So we're doing a Japanese culture video. A lot of Westerners, I know a lot of my viewers are actually from Asia, because a lot of the people who use Facebook, where I do a lot of advertising, are from like the Philippines and things like that. But for you Westerners out there, you Americans and Europeans, it's important to know that there is a giant difference in culture between Japan and America, or Japan and the West, the East and the West, and it's not something that needs to just be brushed off. You do need to consider this when you're translating, when you're talking to people in Japan, etc., etc., etc. And today I want to talk a little bit about this. What happened was, on one of the Facebook groups that I'm with, that I'm in about Japanese, somebody posted a meme of their attempt to say "Okay, boomer." I guess that's the meme that the kids today are using. I'm too old. Just in case you're young and you hear the word boomer, be aware that boomers are people who were born after World War II. Like, all the soldiers came back from the war, and there were pretty women who hadn't seen a man in a long time, and boom, there was a population explosion. So that, like, 1950s to 1940 to 1960 generation, those are the boomers. So lots of kids today think that, like, people born in the 1990s are boomers. I don't know. They don't know their history. Which is to say, I'm going to be teaching a little bit of history and some of my own personal experience in context to the conversation that was going on, so we get a little bit of a better flavor of Japanese culture. All right, let's get started. Help a guy out. Videos take hours to make, and I'm trying to make them at least 3 times a week, give or take. It used to be daily, but it just got to be too much. I got 2 kids, and they keep me busy. 3 cents a day, $1 a month. Bonus materials on Patreon or Subscribestar, links below. Likes are free, and they help out a whole bunch, because YouTube's like, if you get likes, you get to be seen more. And so are comments. They want interaction. So it helps me out a lot if you like and comment. So please consider doing that much, and share it on your social media so people know I exist. All right, this is what started it. Somebody wrote down "Okay, boomer" with whatever this anime girl is, and then it says "Wakatta oji-san," which it's an alright translation for "Okay, boomer," but whatever. Let's not get into the grammar too much right now. We're doing culture. Okay, so on Facebook there was somebody from East Asia. I'm not exactly sure where. She had an interesting name that was not Japanese. I'm not going to say their name, but let's just call her A-san. And said, this is lame to try to replicate in this "Okay, boomer" thing in Japanese, because Japanese culture is about total respect, not like the Western bad attitude of zero respect that stinks so much that she dropped the F-bomb, which I deleted here, this meme. Okay, so she's not wrong, and she's not right. She's exaggerating. Indeed, Japan, what's the term? Really, I mean, from the Western perspective, it looks like brainwashing. They, quote-unquote, brainwash respect into people. They have that senpai kohai system that makes 0 sense to us. I've talked to Japanese people about this senpai kohai. So just because someone's older than you in school, you kind of have to do what they say. That's your senpai. That's all those "notice me senpai" jokes that are out there. The kohai is kind of like the B of the of the relationship, and it's rough. I've talked to Japanese people before, and I said, "What if you have a horribly abusive, senpai, and there's no, like, all of your senpais are horribly abusive, and there's nothing, like, what do you do?" And legit, they've said, "Well, suicide's an option." So I'm not joking. This is welcome to Japanese culture. There is definitely respect that is not earned, forced upon people, and accepted by people, and it is done at a very, very early age. Very early. When you see Japanese kids who are like 4 or 5 years old, even before school, you'll notice a difference in behavior than American kids who are 4 and 5, or, Western kids who are 4 and 5 years old. There is something astonishingly culturally different about this authority and respect for authority in East Asia, especially Japan, that is not at all communicated in the West. So it is different. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. We're going to have some fun history with this. That being said, let's be honest. The Westerners don't have no respect. We're just... Now from the Western perspective, we're amazingly individualistic, which has its problems. I'm a crazy libertarian, so I love individual responsibility, blah, 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 blah. But it causes problems. When you think you're the center of the universe, at some point you need to accept that you're part of society. And that, when somebody comes around and, tries to tell you what to do, you might actually want to listen to them because, they might be your teacher or like a police officer or something. This guy that I listen to, Jonathan Peugeot, he talks about this situation with Karate Kid. I remember the scene where the original, not the one with whatever that Jaden Smith, is that his name? The original one, there's Mr. Miyagi who makes the kid do all of this basically chores around the house, and it looks like the kid's a slave. And the kid finally gets pissed off. He's like, "You gotta teach me karate." And then Mr. Miyagi just says, "Listen, shut your mouth. I'm gonna attack you, do these different things." And he shows how all of these chores that he's doing around the house are karate. And he gets put in his place is the phrase that's that's presented. So the kid who's the Westerner gets angry in his individualistic idea, and the Easterner, the Japanese guy, Mr. Miyagi, is like, "Listen, a kid, we're doing it. You need to trust me. At some point you need to just trust me. I'm older than you. Shut your mouth." Okay, so that's actually an interesting movie to illustrate this as well. Okay, so A-san said this, a little bit exaggerated, but not necessarily wrong. There's a second person, so there's a response to A-san by B-san. So A said that, and then B said this. They meant to say a Western country, but I have respect. You're assuming all West... this person needs to learn how to type. I'm in a Western country, and I have respect. You are assuming, not you're assuming, because that's the wrong you're, that all Westerners are disrespectful, period. That is not true, period. I don't think you guys should take this post seriously. It's just a joke. Okay, so indeed, when we say, "Okay, boomer," we're joking. And if you're watching this, B, you need to learn how to type better. And everyone out there, please don't type like this. This is horrible to read. All right, so look at this. We're just making a joke. It's not a big deal, blah, 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 blah. But then again, this okay boomer mentality, this meme, indeed expresses, "Listen, you're older than me. I don't care what your opinion is. You're a crazy old person." Look at all the memes and look around you in media, and you're going to see in the Western countries a routine dismissal of authority by the younger generation. The punk culture, rock culture. You look around, it's everywhere. Everywhere you look in the West, there is a feeling of, "I don't need to respect you just because you're older than me or because you have more money than me, blah, 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 blah. You have to earn my respect." And I think that's a key point. In Western countries, this idea of earn my respect is important. But then again, at some point you have to respect people even if they're not, even if they haven't earned it yet. Okay, but that's a giant difference between East and West. In the East, a meme like this is, basically unheard of. It really is basically unheard of in Japan. Yes, it is. I think it was The Simpsons. When The Simpsons came into Japan, they had to edit out a lot of the horribly disrespectful stuff that Bart Simpson was saying to his father and his seniors in the country, in Japan, to make it acceptable to the culture. So the memes like this are very much not even thought of in Japan. So that's that. All right. Then A responded to B. So the original person who said that crazy Westerners have no respect, and then B was like, no, some of us have respect. So it's not completely opposite to Japanese respectful culture. I think she's talking about the meme. I don't know. And yes, a lot of Westerners are disrespectful, which is true. I mean, honestly, compared to other, you could say it might be a good thing, but a lot of us are very disrespectful to authority. Not just to older people, but in general. She says, you can go to any major American city and watch people throwing garbage in the streets, jaywalking, ignoring rules and laws. It's why I would choose to live in Japan over any city in the USA. The respect is so much different. Okay, that's true to an extent. Like, if you go to Japan, the streets are very clean. The people are, old people are just out cleaning randomly. If you throw your garbage out incorrectly and your neighbor sees you, they'll yell at you. I'm not joking. And things like that. And whereas in America, this is very true. People break the laws very frequently in the USA and in the West too. Jaywalking isn't that big of a deal. You go into Japan, there's not a lot of jaywalking and things like that. So this is true. That there is a very strong respect for the rules. My friend who was in Japan, he just bought, I think it was a brand new PS3, PlayStation 3, and he left it in the back of his car while we were all playing football in a park in Japan. And he was like, we're in a major city. Like, if I were to do this in any major city in America or Canada and left my PlayStation 3 in obvious view in the parking lot of a park for hours, it would be gone. Somebody would break in and steal it. It didn't happen. I lost my wallet so many times because I'm an idiot in Japan. Every single time it was brought back to me. I had to go to the little police box, which are very convenient. But they would always have it and none of the money was missing. And the rule is if somebody gives their name when they find the wallet, they get like 10% or something like that. I forget what the rule is exactly. It's like 10 to 30% of whatever's in it. The people would intentionally not give their names so that I could keep my money. So try losing your wallet in New York City or something like that. Good luck. Okay. So there is accuracy to here, but this lady is also exaggerating. I mean, and just to make things even more funny, she's talking about how Westerners are disrespectful, and her picture is her giving 2 middle fingers on her Facebook page. So there's some... B needs to learn how to type. A needs to learn how to think clearly. B, I'm glad to hear you have respect. You're right, it is not all Westerners. She has that in quotation, I guess. But for sure, generally speaking, and she's right, generally speaking, there's a huge difference in respect in Western society compared to Japanese society. There just is. There is. People really hold their true emotions close to their hearts in Japan, whereas in America, we'll just blurt it out and, yell at people when we don't like them. All right, Bald McGee. This is what I wrote, and this is kind of what I've been saying. And Japanese culture is changing. This is very true. If you look at kids today, they are more disrespectful. They're breaking more laws. They're dressing strangely compared to their parents' generation. And crime is increasing. And honestly, I think it's because the Western culture is hitting Japan. And this is kind of connected to it. One of my students, who's an American, who has been studying Japanese for a while. She's older. She went to Japan a long time ago, and she went back, and she came back. She says, Gavin, they're getting fat. They're going to McDonald's, and they're getting fat now. They're eating differently, and the kids today are getting chubby. I kind of laughed at it, but she's right. So the times, they are a change in Japan. So if you like your culture, you need to be careful, Japan, because you're slowly turning into the West. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but indeed things are changing in Japan. This was me addressing the I think it was an American or a Westerner, and I told him Japanese humor is, to illustrate the difference, Japanese humor is very different than Western humor. When I'm teaching a Japanese kid who just came to America, because that's what I do over here, that's how I make my meat and potatoes, the most of my money. Please donate and help me do that. Do this. When I come to meet a Japanese person who understands sarcasm. I have yet to meet a Japanese person who understands sarcasm without having lived in the U.S. for a long time. So when I meet somebody who's fresh off the airplane, as a joke, from Japan, and I make sarcastic jokes, they do not get it. They do not get it. It's impossible. They think I'm being serious. So everyone, be careful of what you think is funny in Japan, because it very well might be incredibly rude. Indeed, it is. There's a joke. People will say, the boss will say something like, there a lot of Americans will go over to Japan and teach English, like I did, like many other people did before me. And if you have a kind of a good relationship with your bosses, they'll tell you to do something, and you might be able to get away with saying no, like with a deadpan face, and they'll like look at you like they're about to murder you, but then you smile and they realize you're pulling an American joke, an American joke on them. Of course, do what they tell you. They're your boss, and you're in Japan, so absorb their culture. When I'm tutoring kids, I make it a point to teach sarcasm to them. The easiest way to do this is, like I just said, saying no to questions that should obviously be yes. Like, one of the kids will ask, excuse me, can I ask a question? It's a one-on-one tutoring session. Of course you can ask a question. Of course you can ask a question. But I'll say no sometimes. And it'll take them a few seconds, and you will be surprised how many kids will actually not ask the question when I do that joke. They'll be like, oh, can I ask a question? I'm like, no, you can't. Let's keep going. Like, they'll actually stop. I have to laugh and then say, of course, ask the question to get them to go. And I'm like, and it takes years. It takes years to finally get the sarcasm down. It's very interesting to witness. Okay, and I wrote to A, the lady who thinks all Westerners are disrespectful. I hope you understand that this is a huge cultural difference. The average Westerner, I should have said can't, but I did. I should have said doesn't understand the East's mindset, Japan's mindset. And that the East is completely appalled by what the West finds acceptable. When Westerners go to Japan, we don't understand what the heck they're thinking. They'll say things, and we're like, why would you think that? And then they look at us do something like go to the gun range and shoot a gun and be like, oh my God, how could you do that? What the Westerners find acceptable, Japanese people find terrifying or strange or disgusting. And when the people in Japan say certain things, people from the West will be shell-shocked that anything could have been said like that. I talked to a kid I tutor. I tutor him now. He's a high school kid. He's Japanese. And we were, he's in American schools. We're talking about World War II. And we brought up, kamikazes came up. The airplanes that crashed into the boats. And I was trying to get him to, think about what this would actually be like. And I said, what would you do if this were you? Like, the war is hopelessly lost. Your family, you're summoned by your governing body to go kill yourself with an airplane and just to blow up a boat. But it's pointless. Would you still do it? And he said that even today, knowing what he knows, he would have done it. And he would still do it. Like, if he didn't, his family would be dishonored. And I'm not even joking. They talk like this. He talked like this. His family would be dishonored. It would be horrible if he didn't do this. He would have to do it for society. He'd have to do it for his government, blah, 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 blah. And he would do it. He would actually, he said it out loud, he would kill himself just to fly a plane into a boat. And then I said, I told him, I was like, what are you talking? You would actually do that? Your life is much more important than what your society's leaders might say it is. Now, do you see that? I would do it because my society, my mindset, my, group says to do it. Wait, maybe your leaders are telling you something. Don't treat your life. My society makes demands upon me, and I should oblige it because I make demands upon them. Then I said, maybe the people at the top of your society don't respect what you personally are as much as you would hope they would. Welcome to the East versus West mindset. I'll kill myself for society even if it's pointless. Dude, if it's pointless, you should really consider switching societies. You need to switch team. The Westerners hear me say this, and they're like, of course what Evan's saying is making sense. And when the Easterners hear what I'm saying, they're saying, of course what the kid said makes sense. When the Japanese say it. We both looked at each other like we're crazy. We have a huge cultural difference. Group versus individual. And it's been like this from day one. This is where the history comes in. It's been like this from day one. The first Westerners who came to Japan were amazed that they had finally found a high culture society, but it was completely backwards. So this is really interesting. We'll talk about this later, actually, but So Europe developed these giant boats. They were the first civilization to do so, and they just started floating around the world looking for places to buy and sell stuff. It turns out that so many cultures were cannibalistic and bloodthirsty and maniacal and murderous and like burning people alive because the rain needs you to do this. They came to Japan eventually and they were like, wow, finally someone's more cultured than we are, more civilized than we are, whatever that might mean. Anyway, the Japanese thought that the Westerners were barbarians. We were brutal, disgusting creatures. We were the Nanbanjin, the southern barbarian people. That's literally what that means, the Nanbanjin. And the Westerners thought that the Japanese had little respect for human life. The Japanese, we'll talk about this more, but the Japanese, the Christians came to Japan and started helping sick people who had leprosy. And the Japanese were like, why would you waste your time doing that? Leprosy is still an issue today in Japan. I'm not joking. So the Westerners, the Christians were like, hey, let's help the poor people. And the Japanese were like, why would you waste your time doing that? Our society needs us to do this. They're hopeless. This is a huge divide. This is a huge divide between the cultures. The difference is, I firmly believe this, the difference is Christianity. As much as you may hate Christianity or you might like Christianity, whatever it is, Christianity, I believe, is the difference between European and American culture and Eastern culture. Like, it just makes the most sense. And we'll talk about this more. When Christians began converting huge numbers of people, this should say the shogun, it was Ieyasu, decided we need to nip this in the bud and murdered them horribly. They had to go into hiding, like super mega hiding, to the point where they're basically Anne Franking to this day. They're hiding themselves to this day. Finally, some of them are admitting that they're this hidden Christian organization to this day. Some of them are still hiding, but some of them are finally coming out and admitting it. And people are going to interview them because they're like, whoa, what do you believe? Let's talk about this. Okay, and I wrote that our cultures are basically we're honestly, at this point, incapable of melding fully. But that's why we're so fascinated with each other. That's why anime... Japanese walk around with... If you ever go to Japan or China, they walk around with English on their shirts and it means the weirdest thing. Like, you'll read it and you're like, oh, okay. And Westerners get tattoos of kanji that they have no idea what it means. So for whatever reason, the two cultures can't meld together, but that's why we're so fascinated with it. We all the Westerners are watching anime up the wazoo nowadays. The Ghibli movies are fantastic. Samurais and utter devotion to the group is something that we strangely yearn for. And Japan is astonished by what the Americans and the Europeans have accomplished. They walk over here and they flood over there. Obviously, that's not everybody, but there's a huge group in both civilizations that is very much attracted to the other civilization for whatever reason. All right, now, I said it was about Christianity, so let's talk about this. Christians and guns came together to Japan. I believe it was 1563. I think is the number 1563 or 1562 that the first Europeans arrived in Japan. It was a boat that was trading with Chinese, but to the best of our knowledge, a storm blew it off course, and it landed in Tanegashima. And I believe they were Portuguese, I think they were Portuguese. Maybe I'm wrong about that. It's been a while since I've read these books. But they had guns. And so the samurai were like, guns, I want those. They weren't that interested in Christianity that came along with the guns, but they definitely wanted the guns, so they said, yeah, whatever, let's take the Christianity. Plus, they didn't fully understand what Christianity was. I mean, try explaining the Holy Trinity when you don't speak any Japanese, and you'll immediately see that it's going to take some time for this Christianity thing to be understood by Japanese people. Okay, Oda Nobunaga noticed that he could... Not only that... a lot of the Japanese didn't want the Christianity, but this is interesting. Oda Nobunaga and the other Ieyasu and there's the three people: Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. They're sort of the three people who are credited with unifying Japan. Horrible warfare, lots of death, but they're the people who unified. Whenever you hear that term unification in history, it means lots of people dying. So they're the people who unified Japan. And they're all. I'm just going to mush them together. Those three people realize that they can balance the Christianity's religious aspect against the Buddhist religious aspect, because at that time the Buddhists were very powerful in society, and if he could have another religion fighting with Buddhism for the religious sect of people's minds, he can, if this is Oda Nobunaga's power and this is Buddhism's power, and then Christianity comes in, it'll sort of lessen the Buddhist power, but keep his power the same, so he gets more powerful relatively. So he actually was trying to play the Jesuits, who are that's a form of Catholicism, off of the Buddhists, and he could get guns. So Oda Nobunaga is kind of the first shogun to really use guns en masse. He basically changed what it meant to be a samurai. It went from archery to sword, and then finally with the guns, it became basically Western style fighting. Oda Nobunaga really, and the Ieyasu's and all those three people, they really consumed Western military tactics, Western how to do things, because he realized if you have a giant boat that across the world, maybe we should listen to you. Okay, so 3. The weird Christians were doing very weird things, like helping people who had leprosy. Like they started leprosy hospitals, and it was mind-blowing to the Japanese. They had no idea why they were doing this. And they would help out common farmers around the villages. I want to talk about this because this is interesting. They were helping people with leprosy to try to, A, to help people, and B, also to convince people to become Christian. I mean, there's always that aspect to it. But eventually, in order to win over the powerful people in Japan, the Christians, the Jesuits, they chose to stop helping leprosy. Because the Japanese people were so disgusted by leprosy that helping the people with leprosy made the higher society people disgusted with Christians. I want to emphasize this. The Christians came to Japan, saw sick people, and said, "Let's help you guys out." They're helping the people out, and then the Christians are going to talk to the powerful people, and the powerful people are like, "Whoa, dude, you guys and those leprosy things, we don't really need you around here." And they actually shut the hospitals down and stopped helping the people with leprosy in order to try to convince the higher ups to allow them to go evangelize the religion in places like Kyoto. So, again, huge difference in cultures, and it very much is a Christian, non-Christian thing. Okay, number 4. Problems with translations, like I talked about earlier, led to setbacks. Try explaining the Holy Trinity when you don't speak Japanese. And even if you do speak Japanese, you've never heard of the Holy Trinity before. How do you explain this? So it's one of the jokes is God's name is Deus ex machina. You might have heard that phrase, God from the machine. When they translate that into Japanese, it was Deusu, which sounds very similarly to Daiuso, which is Dai, big, Uso, lie. So Deusu was similar to Daiuso. So to emphasize this, imagine trying to tell people to believe in the giant lie. Just language barriers caused a huge problem. At one point, I think it was Xavier, but by and by, Francisco Xavier, who's named today Zabieru, has become to be a way to call someone bald because he had the weird monk haircut. He began spreading the religion. It began in Kyushu and spread eastward. Okay, so let's talk about this. What was I saying? It was about, the Daiuso. In the beginning, the Christians thought that maybe Buddhism was just a strange sect of Christianity because a lot of it seemed similar until they started translating things more and more properly into the idea that there's a spirit and that there's a group above humans, blah, 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 blah. That's not really found in Buddhism, that there is a god or something like that. It's a non-theistic religion. And it took many years to finally figure out that they were not the same religion. That's how bad the language translation was. A bunch of people discover a new language. Nobody speaks their language. They're trying to teach religion. I mean, talk about a difficult task. Xavier is, I believe, he's a saint. He's been, is it beatified? I don't know my Catholic terms. He's a saint. In fact, one of the most powerful, I think, college basketball teams is Xavier College, I think. So He's famous here in the West. Anyway, number 5. This new religion, Christianity, had weird ideas like. Now this is important. This is the thing. There's a stronger force than any king or daimyo or shogun or anything like that. There's something above humans. I mean, think about this. Your entire religion is just. Your entire culture is do what your boss tells you. And then these guys come in and say, no, your boss has a boss. No matter how many bosses you think your boss has, that top boss has a boss. So this is beginning to screw with the culture. And there's actually an objective morality. The idea was that after World War II, they were trying to throw the Nazis into jail. They were trying to try them. And they said, I was just following orders. And that didn't cut fly. They threw the Nazis in jail anyway. Now, think about that. That's kind of what the Japanese mindset was. We're following orders. My boss told me to do this. His boss told him to do that, blah, 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 blah. Really, it's the guy at the top's fault, isn't it? Says Japanese people, even today, when they talk about what's going on. Whereas the Westerners are saying, no, you're responsible for your actions, and there's this dude named God, and he's telling you to do the right thing. So this, I want to emphasize, like, I'm not trying to convert anybody here to Christianity, but I'm trying to show you how this is likely the giant schism between the East and the West, and it's probably Judeo-Christianity, that sort of stuff. I'm sure if the Jewish people had discovered Japan, there'd be different stories that are similar. Although Jewish people don't really, they're not that interested in non-Jewish people for making marriages. So anyway, this idea of an objective morality is largely foreign to Japan at the time. Not entirely foreign, but very foreign. Buddhism was teaching them things like don't have desires, which, that's kind of an objective morality, but not really. I mean, to not have a desire. Horrible stories are told where, mothers are, trying to become Buddhist and they just abandon their children. It's very sad stuff. Anyway, this idea of objective morality comes into Japan, and it's really screwing with their culture. It really is, and I want to emphasize this. It's very difficult on their culture. Okay, 6. The entire Asian continent's religion of obey your master, fit into society, and you're a cog in a wheel is now being uprooted by obey the master of masters, and then he will find a place for you in society, and you are made in God's image, and you are important. So read number 6. That's basically what I've just been saying, but this is what the schism is. And when Tokugawa Ieyasu who had largely been saying, okay, whatever, we have Christians, it's fine, blah, 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 he was finally made aware of this issue, and he realized how bad it was becoming. He decided to crack down, and the brutal murders of Christians began. Okay? Very sad stuff, disgusting stuff. You can research it on your own. I don't want to get into that so much, but it was very bad. Fun/terrible stuff. The Europeans. So this is when the Europeans came to Japan. They were shocked everywhere around the world. They were seeing cannibals and just people murdering each other and naked people everywhere, and they're burning, their wives. When they got to India, they were disgusted by when a man died who was married to a woman, his wife would have to commit suicide on his funeral pyre. Stuff like that was happening around the world. In South America, they had these giant ziggurats, and they would rip. Do you remember the Indiana Jones movie where they ripped the dude's heart out and they're like, Kaliba? Like, that was actually happening in South America. And they see this, and they're like, oh my God, what's wrong with the world? Everyone's insane. They come to Japan, and it's not like that at all. There's buildings, people are generally polite, blah, 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 blah. In fact, the Europeans said that the Japanese were more civilized than the people in Europe. It was the first time they felt less civilized than another culture. But they always made the point of everything was backwards. And it's always fun to read these. I'm going to give you a little bit of a reading list after this. The Japanese women wanted to be pale, and they wanted to have dark teeth. Whereas in, the Europe, they wanted to have tan skin, and they wanted to have white teeth. Japanese people didn't eat meat. The Japanese thought that the Europeans were disgusting for eating so much meat. That was kind of a joke. We ate too much meat. Also, apparently, the Japanese were the Americans. Or sorry, they weren't Americans yet. The Westerners were known for farting, burping, and having way too much fun at the dinner table. The Japanese took baths once or twice a day, maybe numerous times a week, whereas the Europeans were maybe 3 times a year. So they were very stinky. The Japanese would eat in small bites and quietly, while the Westerners were having parties. Okay, so huge difference. It's backwards, and it's so funny because this is exactly it. It's backwards. America, West, individual, East Asia, be part of a society, whereas that's backwards. I mean, that's exactly it. It's backwards. Okay, so the Christians eventually had to completely hide or be murdered in Japan. This is just a different note. These are just pinpoints. This is one fun thing. The Christians eventually had to completely hide or be murdered. They're hiding from their government. For centuries, even today, there are some that are still in hiding. Even today, there are Christians from this 400, 500 years ago that are hiding. They still don't trust their government. They've been told not to trust their government for so long, they still don't. This is the effect of Christianity that has had on people's lives. Those that have come out from hiding are only doing so now because they realize they're the last of this, this culture. They're showing what they were praying, and like a game of telephone, what they were praying is completely different than what the churches were saying, because your great-great-great-great-grandmother knows the real stuff, and then 30 generations later, your telephone purple monkey dishwasher. And also, they admit they have no idea what any of the stuff they're saying means. So they're interested nowadays. It's interesting to see what the hidden Christians of Japan are doing compared to what the Christian Christians are doing, and they're different. They're different. Just like the game of telephone, over hundreds of years, it's become different. There's a movie, Silence, directed by Martin Scorsese. It was based off the book Chinmoku. Silence is what that means, written by Shusaku Endo, which is about this time of the Christians being murdered in Japan. There's some books you can read about it. All of these books will do a great job of summarizing, well, I don't know about summarizing, but going into detail of what I'm saying. If you read these books, you will definitely see how the East and the West are different. And In Search of Japan's Hidden Christians is an easy read, a good, quick, easy read. Samurai Williams, I think, is a fun read. This is about William Adams, who was a Protestant who came from Europe western to Japan. So he came in from the West as opposed to from the East. Like, if this is Europe and this is Japan, usually they went around Africa to Japan, but he went this way, and lots of people died. Anyway, he was granted samurai title by the it was either Ieyasu or Nobunaga. Sorry, I forget exactly. I haven't finished reading this book, but it's just an in-depth discussion of Christianity in Japan and the horrors that happened. And then Silence was the book that I just mentioned. This is fiction. These other ones are nonfiction. Great stuff. Easy, fun. Easy read, In Search of Japan's Hidden Christian by John Dougal. A fun read, Samurai William. It's pretty fun to see all the crazy stuff they did. There's some information that's kind of unnecessary in this book. This one's very more scholarly, and Silence is a fiction book that emphasizes the issues of Christianity in Japan. All right, you saw me talk about tattoos a few things ago. Somebody else in the conversation on the Facebook post was talking about tattoos, and he said, "Judge me by my work ethic and passion. I have tattoos based on my cultural heritage, blah, 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 blah." And I said, that's fine. You can have tattoos all you want to, but judge me by my work ethic and passion, that's a very Western idea. If you walk into a job interview and you got face tattoos and hand tattoos, in Japan, you're not getting hired. I mean, maybe you will, but you can't even really go into an onsen. You can't really go into the hot springs in Japan. In order to keep the Yakuza troublemakers out, they came up with the lie that the ink will spoil the water. So you can't, people with tattoos can't go into the onsen, is what they say. It's obviously nonsense, but they didn't want to keep the troublemakers out and have a good excuse not to. Tattoos in Japan are very much a big no-no. So if you do have tattoos that are visible, I don't know, try to hide them as much as you can. I don't know. You kind of get a little bit of a pass because you're a Westerner. but that's about it. Now notice this. I have pictures of Yakuza who have tattoos. Notice, they get tattoos too, but even they limit it. The Yakuza are the mafia of Japan, the troublemakers of Japan, the crime syndicates of Japan, the gangs of Japan. Even they limit their tattoos to places that are hidden by their clothing. Do you see this? Like, the collar is going to hide most of this. The cuffs of his sleeves are going to cover this. He doesn't want his down by the wrist. He wants to be able to hide these. Okay, so just this is the difference. Even tattoos, even when you get crazy, awesome tattoos like this, there are limits in Japan, even if you're the crime syndicate family, you know? Even if you're the bad boy of Japan, you're still putting a limit on what you do with your tattoos. This is fascinating. I made the joke that this is what I wrote. I told him, I'm a Westerner, and look, she's doing the same thing. She's hiding her tattoos as best she can behind clothing. I'm sure that if you got this kind of tattoos and you're actually in the Yakuza today, they might actually make an exception for you in the onsen. Or maybe she has a private onsen. Who knows? I wrote to him, I said, I'm a Westerner and I largely agree. People should judge you by your works. That's actually in the Bible. Oh, Christianity again. Westerners have that belief and Easterners don't really have that belief. Japanese people mostly won't afford you the courtesy of waiting to get to know you. Like, somebody, this is the Easterner, says the Easterner, someone who is willing to get a tattoo that shows even when working clearly values himself over the group or team. No customer would want to do business with someone like that, is kind of the idea. And that's true. Whereas the Westerner would say, yeah, he's got some weird tattoos, but he's a nice guy. Looks like, looking at his tattoos, it looks like he likes video games, or maybe he's Irish. He has those Celtic things or something. Ask him to show you the one on his butt. That would be a Western mindset about tattoos. And you can see the dramatic difference. You can see the dramatic difference in culture with tattoos. This is a fantastic illustration as well of the difference in culture. Looks like I'm at the end of the presentation. This was a long one. I hope it's educational. I hope you learned something, and I hope you see. I hope I put a little bit of information in your head about the differences in culture. This will help you see the differences in language to some extent. You'll find, Japanese has politeness built into the language. Respect is built into the language. Whereas in English, we have ways to show politeness, but it's not really, we don't have a polite form of a verb like the Japanese do. So anyway, I hope this helps illustrate the difference between the mindsets so that when you're dealing with somebody who's Japanese, or if you're Japanese dealing with somebody who's an American or Westerner, hopefully you can begin to see just how gigantic the difference is and what you're up against. So I hope it's educational. Have yourself a happy dappy day. Peace out. And let's sing Vampirina.
We can sing Booty Vampirina.
You want to sing Booty Vampirina? What's that song? We're living the scream.
Whoa, Vampirina. I can make zoo. Vampirina.
Maybe blue with pointy teeth.
Me blue is